your medical school applications. For those of you who do not know me, I am Dr. Natasha Hill. I am one of the educational advisors here in the Office of Intramural Training and Education, and I'm joined here today by two of my colleagues, Dr. Gail Siebel, who helps out with some of the personal statement review, and the director of the educational program, Dr. Brittany Hardy, who will remain off camera today, but will be here to answer all of your questions. Well, maybe not all of them, but most of your questions. I'll probably answer some of them as well. So welcome today. We have a lot to cover when it comes to the application, and this is our overview. So today we're really going to take you through the application, point out some subtle differences between the AACOMAS application and the Texas Medical School application. But in general, we're going to go through how the application system works, important dates that you're going to want to keep in mind. And then we're going to go through the different sections of the application so you know how to fill those in and best approaches. And then we're going to talk about what happens after you submit your application and then go through some programs that may be beneficial to you, such as the fee assistantship program, and provide you with some resources here at the NIH and at the AAMC. But before we get started, and hopefully, Gail, the chat is on right now, so that all of you that are here can tell us, what application system you're going to be using to apply this year, or and so we have some AMCAS, very good, or AAMC. We have AACOMAS, so some DOs, very good. And so that's great. So we have some people applying DOs, some people applying to allopathic medicine using AMCAS. I'm actually surprised I don't see any Texas applicants out there. We usually get those in the office, but we'll talk you through the application system and hopefully give you all the information you need so that you can get through it. But next, why do you all think that the application is important? And you can drop some comments into the chat as well there.
Yeah, some people typing, so just 1 second.
Yep, no problem. To filter out people maybe wanting to go into medicine for the wrong reason. Okay. It lets medical students know why you want to be a doctor. Yes, it does. Very good. So we got some good comments in there. Thank you all for that. And so, yes, they want to see who you are on paper, well written on paper, and show clearly and holistically what you've done to prepare yourself for medical school and to make sure you're choosing the right school, right? Make sure that you're actually want to go to medical school or whatever professional school you're applying to, right? And so they're looking at your experiences. Are you making a solid and sound decision? And so for the application system, each website has their own, or each application system has their own website. This is a picture of the AMCAS website. For those of you who will be applying through the AAMC, you will be using AMCAS, which is the American Medical College Application Service. And so that is the specific service that you will be using. You'll be logging in here to access the application. And if you have any questions or any problems, there's the contact information for the AMCAS program. The AAMC individuals are very helpful and very willing to assist you as you apply for medical school. And I'd really, encourage you to go through this page and read the information that they have available for you because they have a lot of great resources. And so how does the application work? Well, it starts with you, the applicant. You're going to go through your application and fill all of the pertinent details as well as request your transcripts to be sent to the application service, or AMCAS in this case, right? You're going to pay your associated fees, and your application is going to move on to the processing step. And this is where AMCAS is going to go through and do their verification process once they receive your transcripts, as well as calculate that AMCAS GPA. And once that process is complete, they will distribute or deliver your application to your designated medical schools and your letters of recommendation on a rolling basis as they receive them. So, some important dates for the 2027 application cycle. So first, when we talk about deadlines, what we mean by deadlines is on the date that the deadline occurs, your deadline is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. So what that means is, say that it's the early decision program, which has a deadline of April 3rd. That means April 3rd at 11:59 p.m. August 3rd at 11:59 p.m. is the deadline, and that's p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're in spend the first week of August in California, remember that it's going to be 8:59 there is going to be your deadline. And then in addition, when you look at these deadlines, your transcripts need to be submitted to the AMCAS system within 14 calendar days of the deadline. But this is kind of a moot point for most of you, because most of you are not going to wait to the deadline to apply. A lot of you are excited about getting your application in early. And so let's look at some of those early dates. And so the application service is going to open for AMCAS on May 5th, and the first submissions will begin on May 28th, which is the Thursday after Memorial Day. And so for those of you who are applying DO school, your application system will open and the first submissions are the same day on May 4th. And if anybody has joined us that is applying to the Texas schools, that application system is going to open on May 1st at 8 a.m. Central Time, and those first submissions will be on May 15th. Okay, so back to the AMCAS application system. The first batch of applications will be transmitted to medical schools on June 26th, which is that last week in June. That last full week in June. And so that is going to be the first day that medical schools see your application. Now, once that first batch is transmitted, AMCAS will, on a rolling basis, send over additional applications as they come available following the verification process. And again, the early decision deadline is, or early decision program submission deadline is August 3rd, and deadlines for submission of the primary application outside of the early decision program are range from September to December. So what is the early decision program? Well, this is an opportunity for you to get an acceptance to one medical school, meaning that if you're applying to the early decision program, you're applying to only one medical school when you submit your application by August 3rd. And you're held by the strict program agreement. So basically what that means is if you get accepted into that medical school through the early decision program, that is the school that you're committed to go to and matriculate to in the fall. And so those results come out October 1st. And so for those applicants who go through this program and meet all of the guidelines and criteria, if you're not accepted on October 1st, at that point, your application for that school will re-enter the regular pool of applications. And then you're able to add schools to your medical school application. And so you would have to wait until October 1st going through the early decision program to add any additional schools if you want to. And then those schools will be sending you secondaries and then considering you once you submit those secondaries. So keep that in mind when it comes to the early decision program. So there are about 155 medical schools that participate in the AMCAS application system. So essentially that's all of the schools in the United States except for those public Texas schools. And about 153 of those schools use the AMCAS letter system, and 132 of them will use the AMCAS or the AAMC background check. So let's think about the fees when it comes to applying to medical school. You can apply to one designated school as well as pay those processing fees for your application at $180 for AMCAS. And then each school after that is $48 each. For those of you who are applying through AACOMAS, your application or your initial application fee for that one designated school is $198. Each school after that that you want to add to your application is an additional $60. For those of you who will be applying through the Texas system has a flat rate regardless of how many Texas schools you apply to, and that flat rate is $235. So each application system has an application guide. Now, this is a very valuable resource. I highly recommend you all go down and download, if you can, your application guide and peruse through it a little bit. It gives you any and everything you need to know about the application in great detail. Every question that you can think of is there. And so please consider reviewing that. The application consists of 9 different sections, starting with identifying information, going through the schools you attended, your personal information like, your current address and stuff like that, to the coursework that you've completed in undergrad and graduate schools, your experiences, your letters of rec, the medical schools that you want to apply to, your essays like your personal statement, and your standardized test. And so we're going to go through each one of these sections in a little bit of detail to kind of give you some tips and helpful hints of how to approach each of these sections. But first, let's talk about some of the changes that are occurring with the application for this 2027 cycle. And so one of the major changes that you'll see is the change to the social justice and advocacy experience has been updated to be named now community health advocacy, right? And so this is an experience where you're actively working to influence, support, or advance conditions that improve, population health or community health, right? And these experiences are generally characterized by you showing that initiative, showing that sustained engagement, and focusing on the impact rather than participation alone. And so here at the bottom in green, we have an example of what would be considered a community health experience versus a community service experience. And the other change that's happened with the AMCAS application system is that AMCAS has gone through and made the application system a bit more user-friendly than it used to be. And so some of you who are applying for the first time are not going to really notice this change, but those of you who applied last year or previously may be able to see the changes in the user-friendliness of the getting through the application. Alrighty, so once you click that sign on button on the AMCAS website, you're going to go to this page, which is basically where you put in your information. If you have a AAMC account because you've, used their services before, like for registering and taking the MCAT, for purchasing some of their MCAT material, for MSAR, or for whatever reason you have used their AAMC service before and you have a AAMC ID, you're going to use that login information to access the application. If for whatever reason you've never logged on or used the AAMC services before, you're going to need to create an account. And so you're going to click the Create a AAMC account button, and it's going to take you to this page where you're going to fill in your personal information. And remember, once again, you only need to create an account if you do not already have a AAMC ID. And so once you've either signed in or created your account, you're going to end up on this page. And basically, it's going to give you the upcoming AMCAS cycle, which is the cycle that you will be applying to, the 2027 application cycle. The cycles are named for the year that you will matriculate into medical school. So you're planning to matriculate, if you're applying next month, you're planning to matriculate to medical school September or in summer or fall of 2027. What you will see currently right now is that there is an open application, and that's the cycle for the 2026. Those that plan to matriculate this fall. So please don't go in and start filling out information on the 2026 application. Make sure you're selecting the right year come May 4th or May 5th, excuse me. Okay, so once the application system opens up and you click the 2027 application, you're going to be taken to your profile. Your profile is where all of your identifying information is held. So you can go through here, make sure it's accurate. If for whatever reason you've had a name change or some of your personal information has changed, make those adjustments on your profile. Do not try to make them on the identifying information section of the application. That is all done on the profile. And once you verify that everything on your profile is complete and accurate, you're going to click save and continue on to the application, which is going to bring you to the main menu. And right now you're looking at a viewpoint of the top half of the main menu. On the left side, what you're seeing is your personal information that you've entered into your profile. On the right side, you're seeing all the information that has to do with the application that you're working on. You get a glimpse of what sections you completed, which ones are incompleted, the status of your application, which when you start is obviously going to be not submitted, but come May 28th or thereafter, you're going to see submitted at some point on there, and you're going to see status updates, right? And you can always check your status after you submit it to see where it is in the queue. And that button is located on the bottom of this box on the top. And you're going to get a drop down box that's going to show you, what's your application status here. Right now, this is an example of a not submitted application, so there's not a lot of statuses there. But once you've submitted and it's gone through the verification and it's been transmitted to schools, you're going to see those additional blocks for that additional information as it goes and moves along the path towards being reviewed. Okay, so on the bottom half of the main menu, you're going to have on the left side some quick references and useful information that the AAMC provides you links for. And on the right side of the bottom half of the screen, you're going to have the document status for the transcripts and letter of recommendation that AMCAS has received on your behalf, right? And so after you submit your application and you're waiting on those letters to come in, you'll be able to see that information change and you'll be able to view the status of your documents. Okay, so when you start completing your application, like I said, the identifying information stuff is going to be pre-populated with the information that's on your profile. If for any reason something looks wrong and you need to change something here, you need to go to your profile to edit it. The next section is the schools that you've attended. And so you're going to start with the high school that you attended and then move on to the colleges. Put the college information, select if it was summer only, if it was a study abroad program that you did at a college, and whether you're going to release your application for your advisors at this school to have access to. And this is completely up to you if you want to release that information. Okay. So on the bottom part of the school attendant page, you're going to be asked if you need or if you're required to submit a transcript for that school. And it's very rare that there's an instance where you're going to select no. But there are a few exceptions where you may have to select no, I'm not submitting a transcript. But majority of the time, for most of you, it's going to be yes, you're going to be submitting a transcript. And so once you hit yes, you can go back to the main menu and you have this nice little button on that top right side that says print transcript request form. And this print transcript request form is going to have a lot of information. And so if your registrar is going to send paper copies of your transcript to AMCAS, you're going to need to have them submit this form with your transcripts. So that way, AMCAS can connect your transcripts with your application to the right school. Now, if you're going to go through one of those third-party like Parchment to get your transcripts electronically delivered to AMCAS, all you need is your AMCAS ID and your transcript ID number. And you're going to have a unique transcript ID number for each school that you put into the AMCAS application. So when you go into Parchment and you place your order, make sure you provide them with these two numbers so that your application will receive that transcript. For those of you who attended foreign universities outside of the United States, please refer to the AMCAS guide or the guide of the application system that you will be using, as foreign transcripts are not accepted by AMCAS. Okay, biographical information. So this is kind of like your personal information, like your address, your permanent address, as well as where you're located right now, a preferred address, right? It's going to talk about your legal residency, your citizenship, your military status, your siblings, and all of that good stuff. So just fill in all of that information piece by piece and move on. And at some point during the biographical information, you're going to come across questions like, have you been involved in a felony or a misdemeanor? Read those questions clearly and make sure you're answering the right way. And if you have been involved in any of these incidences, I mean, don't hide it. You know, you've done it, it's happened. State what happened, and then state, how you mitigated or addressed the issue, what training you did or anything like that, as well as what you learned from the experience and how you've grown from it, right? And some, 1,325 characters is your space limit for that. And so briefly state the problem and move on, okay? All right. Other impactful experiences. Some of you will have the opportunity to write about other impactful experiences if you've had to overcome obstacles and challenges in your life, right? And so if this is your case, the double AMC gives you descriptions and information to help guide you on whether or not you fit the criteria for you to select yes. If it is yes, state the experience and then state, how you've grown and what you've learned from this experience. All right, your next section is your coursework. And your coursework is a very important section for you to really pay attention to. It's a time-consuming section, as well as the section that people struggle with when it comes to the verification process and end up having their applications sent back to them for corrections in this specific section. All right. And so earlier we talked about transcripts and having transcripts sent to the double AMC. And, when you have those transcripts sent to double AMC, maybe also purchase one for yourself so that you have a copy of your official transcripts for when you're filling out your coursework. It's going to become very beneficial for you. And we'll explain why in a minute, but this is what the coursework section is going to look like. You're going to select the information based upon the drop-down box, and then you're going to get to the part where you're filling in things and typing in things manually. And this is where the transcript is going
Natasha,
to be. Yes.
can I ask? Someone had a question about transcript. So for the AACOMAS application, am I entering transcript information and then uploading my official transcript to the portal? Or do I contact my university to send the official transcript to AACOMAS?
So you contact your university to send the official transcript to AACOMAS. All of these application systems need the official transcript directly from the school's registrar, or that third-party supplier like Parchment or whichever ones they accept. Okay? They never want a transcript directly from a student.
Thank you, Natasha.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so transcripts, yeah, that's where we're at. So transcripts become very important for the verification process here, where you're entering in your course information. You want to go to that transcript that you've had sent to yourself, that official copy that looks exactly like what AMCAS, AACOMAS, the Texas medical schools are going to have. And you're going to enter in exactly what you see for the course ID as well as the course name. So there is no discrepancy when AMCAS comes through to verify it, looking at your transcript and looking at what you entered as coursework. Okay? And so that's why the transcript is so important. So please make sure you get yourself an official copy. Please make sure you're requesting your transcripts early on. That way AMCAS can get them and they're there at AMCAS waiting for your application. Alrighty, so the science GPA. So for those of you who are applying AMCAS, and this is an AMCAS only thing, your science GPA is comprised of, your biology, your physics, your math, your chemistry classes. Any other classes that you took outside of that are considered your all other GPA. And then you're going to have your total GPA, which is a combination of your science and all other classes. And AMCAS, through the verification process, are going to calculate each one of those GPAs. And so here's a look at what courses under biology, chemistry, physics, and math are considered science classes. Any other course in this listing are considered non-science classes, according to the AAMC. So for those of you who are applying through AACOMAS, they have their own designation and list of science and non-science classes, which I've linked here. Their list is actually very extensive, so it doesn't actually fit on a slide. And those of you who are applying to the Texas system, they also have a list of science and non-science classes. And I've linked that here as well for you guys to view that information so you can get a sense of when you're selecting a science and non-science class when you're entering in your coursework. Alrighty, FAS. A lot of you like to take FAS classes. So what is FAS? Well, they're known as the Foundation for Advancing Education in the Sciences. And so basically what they are, they're a nonprofit organization that works towards, lifelong learning and that professional development. And what they provide for you is graduate level education. They have like maybe a handful, if that, undergraduate classes. Most of their work is going to be graduate level coursework. So the thing about the FAS courses are they're not from an accredited school, college, or university, and FAS does not grant degrees. So what does that mean? Well, for you, that means it's up to the school's discretion of whether they're going to accept FAS courses first. But the nice thing about the FAS is that they will provide AMCAS with a copy of your transcript, and AMCAS will include that transcript as your graduate coursework most of the time because it's a graduate class as a part of the verification process. Okay. All right, work and activities. So for those of you who attended our workshop a few weeks ago, we went into great detail about work and activity section, but briefly, this is what the screen is going to look like. You're going to have a spot where you're going to select the experience type. You're going to give it a name, tell the dates and hours that you worked. You're going to select if it was a repeated experience. You're going to select if you had some anticipated hours that you plan on doing that you're going to continue to do up until matriculation. So that's usually the month that you submit your application up until August of the matriculation year is usually the time frame that you're looking at. And for those of you who are applying through AMCAS or the Texas system, you both have 3 most meaningful designations for your experiences. So what do I mean by experiences? Well, for the AMCAS system, you have up to 15 entries that are 700 characters where you can describe an experience or an activity or a job that you had as you've been preparing for medical school and, testing your interest in this field. And other experiences where you learn something that's going to be beneficial for you in medical school. So for those of you who were, servers at a restaurant, worked at Walmart, those experiences are still very valuable. You've learned some things that will help you in medical school. So you can include those if they fit in your max 15 experiences. Okay, so of those 15 experiences, 3 of them you're going to select as most meaningful. So that means that you're going to get an additional 1,325 characters to describe, your growth from that experience. Why is it so significant? Why is it so meaningful? What did you learn? How has that propelled you to stay on this course and move forward with your goal of getting to be a physician? All right, Texas schools. You actually have unlimited experiences, but you only have 300 characters, so you need to be very concise and to the point. And again, you do have three most meaningful, but it's only an additional 500 characters to say how you've grown and what you've learned from those experiences. For those of you who are applying AACOMAS, you have unlimited experiences. And this year, we learned, I think it was May 1st or April 1st, we found out that AACOMAS actually increased their character limit to 700 characters for their experiences. So it's no longer 600 like we said in our previous workshop. So 700 for AACOMAS. Alrighty. And so for those of you who are applying some of the other professional programs, here are your character counts and information to help you work on your experiences as well.
Hey, Natasha,
Alrighty.
before you move on, can I, there was a question.
Mhm.
Does the ACOMAS application have a other impactful experiences section? And then same for the Texas application.
The Texas application, I am not as well versed in. So I don't know if the Texas one does, but we can look that up and put a note in our workshop for you to let you know that before we send out the slides for the person that asked that. So the AACOMAS application actually has several different questions in addition to, impactful experiences. I don't remember if it's specifically called other impactful experiences, but they do have an essay that is analogous to it.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Okay. So impactful experiences. Okay, experiences. So this is a list of experiences. As we noted earlier, the AAMC changed the social justice and advocacy to community health advocacy. So I've made that underline and bigger to note that it's new. And we recommend that you have, when you're selecting experiences, you at least have community service, medical clinical volunteering, community service, non-medical volunteering, leadership, shadowing, and research as at least one of your experiences. All right, when you think about what you're going to enter, think about being consistent in the way that you enter things. So, like, if you're listing something, make sure that they're in a single category. So, for instance, if you want to talk about shadowing and you shadowed multiple physicians, you can list them all in that same experience block to use shadowing as one experience because they're all from the same category, right? So, list the names, their specialties of the physicians you shadowed, and then move into what you learned about, the role of a physician. Now, if you're going to use a narrative, supplement it with the list, again, it needs to all be in that same category. Okay, so narrative style allows you to really describe briefly what you did and to explain what you've learned through that experience, right? Lists are good for things like your poster presentations, your publications, if you got any awards or attended any conferences. All of your other experiences are probably going to better lend themselves to the narrative style where you can briefly describe what you did and explain what you learned. And since we're all scientists, we're all big in jargon and acronyms. But for your application, please avoid those. When you're talking about your research, think about focusing on that big picture, right? And what the purpose of was for that research. And then its future application. And you're thinking of a future application in medicine. So you're thinking of, prevention, diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. Excuse me. Okay. When you're talking about your clinical experiences, think about including what you learned about the medical profession, the medical environment, as well as, providing direct patient care, what you learned in that realm as well, right? And when you're thinking about the non-clinical experiences, think about what you learn that's going to be useful in medical school as well as in the profession of being a physician. And when you're going through this, make sure they're properly formatted and punctuated, which is always going to be very important for any writing that you do for your application. Alrighty. So the most meaningful experiences. Here you're selecting the experiences that are most meaningful to you, right? So think about experiences that have really led you down this path and really confirmed that physician is the right job for you, right? Where you've had the most growth, where you've learned the most about yourself and your potential to be a physician. Think about those strong experiences, right? The ones that were really strong, really meaningful, really spoke to you. And we recommend including at least one clinical experience as most meaningful. And I mean, since you're here at the NIH, if you want to include a research as most meaningful, why not your NIH postdoc? Or excuse me, postbac. You guys spend a lot of time here at the NIH doing work. It's a full-time job for at least a year. So maybe you'll consider including it, but you don't have to. Okay, so if you need some more information on filling out your work and activities section, please utilize our workshop that we presented a few weeks ago. It's got some great information to help you really craft those experiences and really think about how to go through them. Alrighty, a question that I have that we get quite often is about overlap between our experiences and your personal statement. And yes, there's expected to be some repetition, some overlap. It's very common, right? But when you think about discussing, the same experience in both your personal statement and your work and activities, you want the narrative to be different, right? It's got to be a different anecdote. What you gain from the experience should be different from the two different documents. But it's perfectly okay to talk about, 110 health in both your personal statement and your work and activities, right? Because you've had a lot of experience, you've been doing it for years, and you've had multiple things that you learned, and it was really meaningful to you. And so you feel that there's a purpose and a strength for pointing it out in multiple different facets when you use, the work and activities in personal statement. And that's perfectly fine. And on the idea of how important, the experiences are and, what you gain from those experiences are, we have this table. And really, what this table is here to illustrate is that it's not all about your numbers, right? And so you see people with those high marks, high MCAT score, greater than a 517, high GPA, greater than a 3.79, but still 27% of them didn't get accepted into medical school, right? And so that might make you scratch your head. And this is kind of an indication that it's more than just the numbers that medical schools are looking for. They're looking for those experiences that have really prepared you. They're looking to see that you're ready to go to medical school, right? And so you have these experiences that you've been involved in that's really, tested your interest, and you've learned so much about, patient care, about what physicians do, about what you value and what communities you want to help, right? And so show them who you are in your application through your personal statement, through your experiences. And again, when looking at the numbers, even applicants with, sorry about that, it's a very sensitive mouse. Applicants who have, a bit lower stats, still a good number or a good proportion of those applicants were still able to get into medical school because their experiences were so strong. All right. So again, experiences. What experiences are medical schools really wanting you to have? Well, here is a glimpse of the first year class pre-med experiences from UMD, so University of Maryland. And basically what you see here is that a good majority of all of their first year class. So if you look at this orange bar, these are the M1 students right now that matriculated in 2025. And you see that a majority of them had volunteer. Actually, all of them did. Some of them just listed volunteer maybe under leadership because they had a combined role where they were volunteering, but volunteering as a leader as well. You see, a lot of people have shadowing. Some of them may have even had a clinical job that was connected to shadowing, like scribing, where they were able to observe a physician, and that's why they had less time shadowing. But everybody's had an experience where they've observed a physician, where they've volunteered in a clinic, in the community, and done research, right? So these are the big important pieces of your application that schools are really looking for. They're very valuable, so make sure you're writing about it and telling your admissions committees what you've learned. And with all of the writing that you're going to do in your application, make sure you edit it and revise it. Consistent style, verb tense, format, active voice, please, positivity throughout your statements, no negative overtones, undertones, anything. And don't use a lot of empty words. A lot of people like to kind of set the stage, give me a glimpse of what type of day it was. It was a hot, sunny day, minimal clouds in the sky on July 3rd, when something happened. You don't need to tell them exactly what the day looked like, right? Just tell them what happened and what you learned from it. And then when you're putting together your essays, read them out loud. It'll help you catch stuff that you would normally miss when you read silently. And then once you've copied and pasted, your writing, your personal statement included, your working activities into the application system, go back to that main menu and hit that print application function and print it out and make sure everything lines up perfectly, right? Did you have two words that fused together because they were different on different lines in Word, and Word has embedded format that the application system doesn't, right? And so you want to make sure that you don't have any typos just because you copied and paste out of Word into the application format. So it's always best to print it out and read it and double check. Okay, so that's the experience section. Let's move on to the letters of evaluation. And so letters of evaluation, I think it was last year, the AAMC updated their portal for letters of evaluation. And so basically everything is electronic now. And so you go into the application system, you get to the letters of evaluation, you're going to click here where it says add a letter requester. Then you're going to get this little pop-up menu, and it's going to have all information that you're going to fill out about your letter, their name, their email address, that contact information. And you're going to even have the opportunity to send it now directly to them, or you can print it out and you can manually send them to it, or you can wait and send it to them later. That's completely up to you, right? And in addition to sending it now, and so you have that option, to send it now or later. So letters of evaluation, how many can you send to AMCAS? You can send up to 10. And for those of you who are applying through AACOMAS, you can send up to 10 letters of evaluation to AACOMAS as well. And so for AMCAS applicants, they only accept electronic letters. So they accept them through the double AMCAS letter writer portal, which is what we were going through. And we will go through the letter submitter side in a moment, as well as Interfolio. Okay. And so you think 10 letters, that's quite a few, considering medical schools usually have a max of about 6-ish letters that they'll accept. Well, the reason that AMCAS is giving you 10 is to give you some versatility. So if you have certain schools that are looking for certain letters, it'll give you the opportunity to make sure that you have all the letter types that your different schools are looking for, right? And you can go in to the application system once you designated your schools, and you can select which letters go to which schools, right? So if, let's say, 10 of your schools want a physician letter, but the other 15 that you're applying to don't, you're going to send that physician letter to those 10 schools. But those other schools, that letter doesn't have to go to, right? And so it is allowing you some versatility, some flexibility, and making sure that the schools get the letters that they're looking for. And so one note to make is that you can't make any changes to the letter information after it's been submitted. So what do they mean by that? Because you never actually see the letter. But think about letter packets. You do actually know who wrote you a letter in those letter packets that your schools puts together, right? And so basically what this means is that if you selected a letter packet and your school submits that letter packet on your behalf, you cannot have MCAS take that letter packet apart to get to Professor X's letter so that you can send Professor X's letter to a specific school or for whatever reason, right? They will not break up a letter packet. If it's submitted as a letter packet, those 10 letters that are in that packet go to each one of the schools that you designate to have the letter packet. Okay? Alrighty. So another note about letters of evaluation is that medical schools are going to require a header of the business if it's something that you volunteered at, like the hospital, or for your community service if it was DC reading or whatnot, or Shepherd's Table. They want the business logo on the top, as well as, a signature of the letter writer at the bottom. These are things that the medical schools are going to be looking for. And so make sure your letter writers know that. Okay, so the letter writer portal is something that was developed to make, managing your request and for your letter writers to submit those letters very seamlessly and very easily. Your letter writers no longer need to, have a double AMC account. They can choose to log in as a guest or sign into their account if they have one to submit your letter. And as you see on the screen here, when they click the link in the email that they get, they're going to get a bunch of information that correlates to your application as well as their information that you provided in your application. And they can choose what method they want to sign in to submit your letter. And the nice thing about this link is that it also provides them access to the letter writer's guide. And so for those of you who've never seen the double AMC letter writer's guide, here's a picture of it right here. And it basically gives your letter writer some guidelines of how to approach writing a strong letter of recommendation on your behalf for medical school. It even includes those competencies that you've been working on, including in your application through your personal statement and your work and activities. It also provides them to your letter writers so that way your letter writers can also include those attributes that they've witnessed in their letter of recommendation on your behalf. Okay? So, how does the system actually work? Well, MCAS, so it's going to actually, like I said, start with you. You're going to enter your letter writer's information into your application. And MCAS is either going to directly send your letter writer an email, saying that this letter was requested. Here's your link to access and submit your letter. Or you can download the request form yourself and email it to your professor, your mentor, or whoever you're requesting a letter from. And then once the letter writer submits that letter to MCAS, MCAS will distribute that letter to the medical schools on a rolling basis. And again, they only accept electronic letters, either through the double AMC letter writer portal or through Interfolio. Okay, so this is a picture of the volume of letters that MCAS gets over the application season. So applications open up in May, and you see a peak in the number of letters in June, which decreases as we get closer and closer to December, which is the deadline of the latest deadline medical schools. Alrighty, so that's the letter section. Now it's time to pick your school designations. And so you have the option of filtering by state, by, deadlines, by program types. If you want to use those filters, you're allowed to. It's up to you. Or you can go through and scroll down the list and select your medical school. Once you've selected your medical school, you're going to hit next and you're going to go to the next page and you're going to select the program type. And so what do I mean by program type? Are you applying MD only? Are you applying to the early decision program at this school? Or are you applying to the combined MD PhD program? And then once you select your program, you're going to go on to the next page where you're going to select if you're a first-time applicant or a reapplicant. And so for those of you who are reapplicants, remember you're only reapplicants to schools that you've applied to in the past. If you're designating a school that you have never applied to before, you are a first-time applicant. So make sure you select accordingly. And thinking of schools and putting together that list of schools, some things to consider are the curriculum, right? What is their curriculum? How is it laid out? What is their teaching mechanism? What are their requirements, right? Think about how you learn and what best suits you, what best curriculum style best suits your learning style, right? Think about their mission, what you value, how your values align with their mission. Their research, do they have research going on that interests you, right? The communities that they serve, are they communities that you're interested in serving? The location, for some of you, location is important. Some of you need to be in an urban setting. Some people want to be near a rock climbing facility. Others want to be able to study on the beach, right? And so location is going to be important for your well-being and your happiness as you're getting through the rigor of medical school. And then your support system. Do you have family in the area? If you don't have family in the area, how difficult is it going to be for you to get from that school to visit your family on a long weekend, right? And so these are things that you want to consider. Maybe you're one of those people that considers the weather. You hate snow. So maybe you probably don't want to go to Dartmouth for medical school, right? Or Wisconsin-Madison for medical school. You want to go somewhere where it doesn't snow, right? So maybe University in Miami is a better suit for you, right? So these things you want to take into consideration. Then some other factors like legacy status or anything of that nature may be important to you. And then once you've gone through everything that's going to make you happy and warm and fuzzy inside and meets with your needs and resonates with you, then you can focus on that GPA and that MCAT and that in-state, out-of-state bias. Okay, so some of you may like to use, US News, World Report to kind of identify what are the best ranked schools and choose from there. Whatever works for you is perfectly fine. This is about what you need out of a medical school, so you have to figure that out. Others of you will find MSAR as a very important resource, very valuable, very useful. And for those of you who do not already have a subscription, a 1-year subscription is $28, a 2-year is still $36. And so this is a valuable resource. Like I said, it gives you a lot of meaningful information to help you kind of really cut down and solidify that school list, like the requirements. What their applicants' profiles look like when it comes to GPA, MCAT, in-state, out-of-state matriculation, percent research, all that good stuff versus their matriculants, right? And then it even gives you a nice matriculant profile so you can take a look at what type of student these schools are accepting or are going to the school after acceptance. And then it gives you additional information about, interviews, MCATs, previewed, anything that you need is pretty much there on MSAR. Alrighty, so for those of you who are applying to DO, DO has a similar resource for you, and it's called DO Explorer. DO Explorer is free, but you do have to sign in, or I guess you can kind of say register for it using your name and email address. And you can explore the different DO schools, their costs, and their metrics and information like that. And it should also have links to the individual schools' websites. Alrighty. So moving forward, since I know a lot of you want to know what the average GPA is for medical matriculants versus applicants, we have it listed here for MD programs. And so for that science GPA, you're looking at like a 3.75 versus a 3.56. And then you have your non-science and total GPAs a bit higher at the 3.88 and 3.81 range for matriculants. And then when you look at the average MCAT score, this is pretty consistent to what we've seen in years past. It's right there around a 512, which is generally where it's at for matriculants to allopathic medical schools. All right, for those of you considering MD, PhD, so your science GPA is slightly higher than that of the average MD at a 3.82, with your non-science and total GPAs for matriculants around a 3.91 and 3.86. And your MCAT is also slightly higher, but on the norm for an MD, PhD applicant at a 516.3. And these are the average numbers for the M1 class this year. So the people who matriculated to medical school and MD, PhD programs summer 2025 or the fall. All right, so unfortunately for DO schools, I could not find the 2025 information as of yet, but I was able to pull the 2024 information, which shows that the GPA for the science was a 3.52, the non-science at a 3.71 for matriculants, and the total was a 3.6. And when you're looking at the MCAT, again, fairly similar for what we see for osteopathic medicine, around a 503 is generally what we see for matriculants. Alrighty, so for those of you who want to apply for the Texas application system, we do have your numbers as well. So for science GPA, it was a 3.81, and for the total, it was a 3.86, with your average MCAT being this very similar to the all other ND schools of 512 or about a 512. Okay, so that's the numbers. Now, just make sure you're still awake and still with me. How many schools are people considering applying to this year? And Gail, if you're still here, can you tell me in the chat what kind of numbers we're seeing?
All right, we'll let people respond a minute. All right, we see a 20, 25 to 30, 10 DO.
Okay.
So some 30 to 40s, but in general, 25
Okay.
to 30.
Okay. So we generally suggest to apply to 15 to 25 medical schools. Once you get up into that 40 range, it becomes a little much when you think about secondaries, right? And so not so much for the primary application, because your primary application goes to all the schools there's, regardless, it's the secondary application where you get those school specific questions, and each school has a different number of prompts that they're going to send you, and you have about that 2 week time to get those back. That's when 40 schools becomes a little bit difficult, and Brittany's going to go more into that in our next workshop. I believe it's June 10th at 3 p.m. So please join us for secondaries.
And 40 schools is also very expensive. Like, keep in mind the cost with this, y'all. That's a lot of money. So 15 to 25, no more than 30 is what we kind of say, but even 25 is even better.
Yeah, 25 is better. It's more manageable. And just to give you a sense about how much this costs, like 25 schools is $1,332. Okay. So when you get up to, 40 schools, that's very expensive. And so keep that in mind. Secondaries and cost. Okay. So when you're putting together your school lists, you want to put something together where you can get all of the information you need in one spot. And so this is just an example of, one of the students in the past that has done this has put together their school list, put, the different scoring ranges for the MCAT in there, GPAs, all that good stuff is in there, and then the median. And so the bulk of your school should be around what your median MCAT score is, but it's okay to have a few that aren't, a few that are significantly higher. That's okay. And sometimes you've had a dream of, I've always wanted to go to Columbia, right? But I got a 515 and they're way out of the range. Or maybe you've always had a dream to go to UPenn in Philadelphia, whose MCAT score I think is average, it's like a 523, right? But you got a 515. It's okay. One or two schools doesn't hurt, right? Even three or four schools that are reaches, it doesn't hurt, right? But the bulk of your schools should be near that median. And when you're looking at MCAT, it's important to not just look at, the applicants that were accepted at this school, which is when you go to MSAR, this is a picture of the new MSAR, and it was recently updated in the last couple days, so you should take a look at that because they have some more dynamic, excuse me, analysis where they're looking at 3-year programs as well. So please take a look at that if you already have access to it. Excuse me. All right, so don't just look at all applicants because this kind of just gives you an average, right? Of in-state, out-of-state, everybody that was accepted, right? And then we have our out-of-state, which doesn't really look much different. They have a median at 520. Everything looks about the same. But then when you get to the in-state applicants, you see that the median MCAT has dropped a point. And so shows you that there are some subtle differences. For some schools, you see that from the median, the out-of-state matriculants or accepted applicants have a higher MCAT score than what's the median. So please look at this information as well. All right, so in-state, out-of-state bias. This is another important factor that's going to be very important for your wallet, especially, right? Because some schools don't take out-of-state students, right? It's just a fact. And so here we have a couple of a few schools circulated or circled or highlighted. And so MC Georgia Augustus, they had 60% of their applications come from out-of-state applicants, but they only took in 0.4% of out-of-state applicants. So that means a good majority of those out-of-state applicants, probably all but one, wasted their money applying to this school because they have an in-state preference. But when you go down and look at Rush in Illinois, you see that about 90% of their applicants are from out of state, and they take about 76% of their applicants from out of state. So that fits, that makes sense. Majority of their applicants are out of state, a majority of their matriculants are out of state. And then we have a second university to look at where, yes, they have a very low number of applicants that are out of state, 8%. But those 8% of people wasted their money because they didn't take any out-of-state applicants. So please take a look at this. If a school doesn't take any out-of-state applicants, please don't waste your time or your money applying to them. Okay? Apply to schools where you have a chance to get in. Okay? And some schools do have in-state biases because they're utilizing taxpayer money to help with those schools. And so they focus on the in-state. Okay? And then other states have what they call interstate agreements. And here I'm going to use the University of Washington because the University of Washington actually doesn't really take anybody from out of state or out of the states next to them that do not have medical schools, right? And so Wyoming, Alaska, which isn't really next to them, but it's close, Montana, Idaho, those schools don't have medical schools. And so Washington serves as their public school. So the University of Washington is their public school. So that is primarily, or that is basically where they take their matriculants from and their accepted applicants. Okay? And so think about these interstate agreements when you're also applying to medical schools or selecting your medical schools. All right, essays. So we had a whole workshop on writing your personal statement. So this is, your why medicine prompt. This is what it's going to look like on the screen. It's going to tell you your prompt. and then it's going to give you a space to fill in. And I'm sure most of you have filled this in, hopefully on a text editor, so that you don't have too many transition mistakes from copying and pasting from the text editor to the application. And don't forget your character count. And here we have the character count for the personal statements for all the professional schools, no matter which one you're applying to. Alrighty. So for the personal statement, do address the prompt, why medicine? For those of you who are applying DO, regardless if you're applying DO through AACOMAS or the Texas system, you need to address why you're applying to osteopathic medicine. Okay? Tell your story and state why you want to be a physician. What was your motivation? How did you test that motivation? How did those tests keep you motivated to continue to explore the field, right? Proofread your document. Stay positive throughout. No negative statements. Use active voice. Be concise in your language. Be succinct. Don't use any unnecessary words. Like I said, we don't care what kind of day it was. Just tell them what they need to know to understand your preparedness for medical school, and include what you learned about the medical profession and your clinical experiences, what you learned about direct patient care, how you've grown from those experiences, and then think about the problem solving aspect of medicine and show how you learned that unique role as well. And we strongly recommend that you do include your clinical experience using at least one doctor showing what you learned about the unique role of a doctor, right? And once you're done writing your personal statement, including your experiences, read your essay and ask yourself, can I use this essay to apply for any of the helping patients roles that I see in a hospital, like social worker, like nurse, like a PA, right? And so if your answer is yes, you need to take a second look at your essay and make it unique to a physician. Okay. Don't make your essay all about kindness and compassion. Don't use passive voice. Don't use bullet points like listing things off in your paragraphs as part of your personal statement. You don't need a hook there. You don't need to be dramatic or anything like that. And also remember, this isn't a creative writing essay. This is not for your English professor in undergrad. This is for medical schools to get a sense that you're prepared and ready to be a physician. So it's a persuasive argument. Do not use quotes. Don't preach to the physicians, telling them what they should do, what they must do. Don't use anything negative once again. And then don't focus your essay only on helping people or being mindful of the underserved, right? You want to have a well-rounded essay. Alrighty, the next part of the application is the standardized test. And so your standardized tests are automatically going to populate on your application. What's important for you to remember here is if you have any future dates. That includes preview. If you have a future date, hit yes, tell them when that date is. If you have a future MCAT test, hit yes, tell them what the date is. That's important because when AMCAS transmits these to your schools want to know if you have future MCATs, or should they be assessing you from the MCAT or preview score or the MCAT score that's listed on your application. And for those of you who are taking preview, make sure that you checked your school and that make sure that they require that preview exam. All right, your next step is to certify your application. Once you certify it and pay your associated fees, it will be transmitted to AMCAS, right? And so verification, what is that? So basically what AMCAS is going to do is they're going to take that nice transcript that you're going to have sent to them on May 5th and compare it to the coursework that you've entered in your application, and they're going to do a line by line check of that information. And as long as it matches, your application will move forward through the process. If it doesn't match, they're going to send it back to you for changes. And then you're going to have to make those changes and resubmit it. So starting the verification process kind of essentially from the beginning again, so they can do that line by line check, right? So please use your transcripts when putting in your coursework. And the verification process usually takes 6 to 8 weeks for AMCAS. And then once they process it, they'll transmit it to your schools of interest that you selected. Okay, so what's peak time for verification? So as you can see here, that green line that may be less noticeable, it took a while at the beginning of the application season last year for AMCAS to verify these applications. And that could have been because they had significantly more applicants who submitted their applications early. And a lot of the applicants noticed last year that it was taking closer to that 8-week period to get those applications verified, right? And so their peak season is June and July, right? August, it starts to taper down until they really don't have much to do in December. Okay, so some reminders. Criminal background checks are required for medical students that are accepted into medical school. They must have a criminal background check to make sure that they will for one, for the patients, for the well-being and mindfulness of your patients, as well as to make sure that you'll be able to get a license once you complete your training. And then also the application and acceptance rules, we have those both linked here. We have a little bit on the application acceptance protocol. And so basically you have your plan to enroll, which you can start selecting in around mid-February. And then, your plan to accept, you wind those down on, what is it, April 15th? So that's today. So the people who applied last year are today selecting, those 3 top medical schools that they're considering matriculating to. And then you have April 30th, where that commit to enroll button becomes available. And that's the first opportunity where you can say, yes, this is the school that I'm going to go to. Alrighty, some additional tools. So here's some additional tools available from the AMCAS system. These are all links that you can use and utilize. Take advantage of them. They have a lot of great resources. The fee assistantship program is a way to get your first 20 schools designations for free. You get a reduced rate on your MCAT on the preview. You get the MCAT, the double AMC MCAT materials for free, and you get the free subscription to MSAR if you're accepted into the fee assistantship program. Take a look at it. Regardless of your financial situation, you may be surprised because you may be able to fit into their requirements. Okay? And so every little bit you can keep every little bit of money you can keep in your pocket is going to be beneficial. So take a look at that. For those of you who are applying at AACOMAS, they also have a fee waiver program. So please take a look at this one because this program is first come, first serve. Once they run out of it, then they don't have any more to give. All right, post submission. Some things that you can do. There's a limited amount of things that you can update or change after you submit. Your name, I don't know, some people may need to change their name or their contact information. You moved, I have no idea why you would need to change your date of birth, but possibly. Your letters of evaluation. Say a letter writer is unable to send you a letter, you're able to remove that person from your application, right? So that way schools aren't waiting for that letter, right? You can change your next test date. Say you need to extend your take a layer test date for whatever reason something happened. You can add or change an existing program that you're applying to, but you will have to pay those subsequent fees. And then you can change or add a school that you'd like to release your application into from the schools that you attend in section for that advisor, your pre-health advisors to see your application. Alrighty, for those of you who are applying MD-PhD, you have 2 additional essays, the Why MD-PhD essay and the Significant Research essay. So in the Why MD-PhD essay, make sure you're focusing on why you need the dual degree and think of them as a unit as opposed to separate entities. And think about, how you're going to use those degrees. The clinically relevant questions that you hope to address in your lab, so you're going to get that information from the clinic, bring it back to your lab so you can develop those clinically relevant hypotheses and have something that you can bring back to the clinic that'll benefit your patients, and you can get some feedback from those findings from your patients. The significant research essay is about a journey of your research story. So tell them about your significant research experiences. Okay, so for those of you who are applying DO, some of the subtle differences for the Y medicine, you're talking about why you want to be a DO physician. And a lot of the times you're going to have shadowed a DO, right? And have them write you a letter in most cases. There are some DO schools that will accept an MD letter, but for the most part, DO schools want a DO letter. They do not have most meaningful, as mentioned before. They have increased the character count for their activities to 700. Also keep in mind that they have an experience section and an achievement section. These are what are both overarching in the AMCAS activities, but they're separated on AACOMAS. And so again, you have 700 characters for both of these. The achievements are like your awards and, your presentations and all that stuff. Your experiences are your volunteering, your work, and your research. And there's no limit on the number of activities that you can write about. Again, personal statement, talk about allopathic medicine, holistic care, manipulative medicine, all of that good stuff. The osteopathic philosophy, those are the things that you're going to want to focus in on this essay. And then your influences essay, who influenced you to apply for medical school and to be a DO? And remember, submission start date is May 4th. For Texas schools, you can apply either MD, DO, dentistry, and veterinary schools. So depending on what you're interested in when it comes to the Texas application. Now remember, their character count is slightly lower for the personal statement at 5,000 characters. But the Texas schools also have a personal characteristics essay. And this essay is very similar to the, life experiences essays that you see, where, you're telling about how your upbringing and your values make you the person that you are today, and so on and so forth. So you have those two experience essays that you're going to talk about. They're both 5,000 characters. You have unlimited number of activities at 300 characters, three most meaningful at 500, and your submission date is the 15th at 8 a.m. in Central Time. Okay. So some upcoming help for all of you that will be planning. Sorry, I forgot to change the date there. That should say matriculation in 2027. But these are our workshops, and those are actually correct, June 10th. And for our secondaries workshop and our interviewing workshop will be July 8th, and then we'll host mock interviews coming in August. So be on the lookout for emails from Dr. Hardy in July about our mock interviews. And I know this is a very busy time for each and every one of you as you guys are preparing your applications and getting things ready. So please, please take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Take care of yourself. Do what you need to do for your wellness and well-being. And remember, the OIT has a lot of resources here for you if you need help in that realm. We also have a new resource for you called Finder, where you can think about, career development and next steps, scientific research, relationships management, and or, your well-being, if that's what you need help with. And so this may be a good resource for you. And lastly, scheduling appointments. So we have our next question and answer session for the MD, PhD application coming this Friday, April 17th. You can schedule one-on-one appointments with our list of advisors. And here's our list of advisor, Dr. John Taborn, who was unable to join us today, Dr. Brittany Hardy, who's here, and myself. And I'm happy to address any last questions.
Hey, Natasha, we did pretty good. You answered most of the questions that came in like immediately as they were coming in. So, someone asked, do we recommend taking Preview and Casper?
So we recommend taking them if the schools require them.
Yeah, I'll just add one to that. you want to give the schools as many ways to evaluate you as you can. So what I say, if the school requires it, of course, take it, right? But if it's recommended but not required, we would still
Take it.
recommend taking it because again, you want to give them as many ways to evaluate you as possible. Same as Casper. And these aren't exams that you study for. There are some practice exams available online, but they're not like the MCAT. It's not something like you specifically study for.
It's more like you get practice in using the software and the systems and get accustomed to answering the questions in a specific way. When it comes to preview for Casper, it's more like you're getting accustomed to using, I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it's Clara, but I could be completely wrong. But that's the system that they're using to, like record you and ask you questions. And so getting a sense of, testing it out and practicing it, but you don't need months on end. You probably need maybe a good afternoon to test it out, and that's good enough. But like Brittany said, if it's recommended and definitely if it's required, yes. If schools aren't going to look at it, then you don't need to waste your time spending money on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Natasha. We're good for the questions.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you all for coming and joining us this very hot Wednesday afternoon. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your evening. And please reach out to us if you have any more questions, and good luck with your applications.